Hey, everybody. We are releasing this episode on the 4th of July. I hope all of you in America are enjoying yourself and relaxing. Although, wouldn't that be very anti American to relax? I'm just kidding. I'm saying that because rest is really on my mind lately, and I'm really practicing a season of rest. So I'm really feeling summer this year. I'm really feeling the holiday. I will be out at one of my really good friend from high school. She's having a big pool party. I can't wait to see all my friends from high school. Just really relishing in these slower days. If you're in the Northern Hemisphere, I know we have listeners all over. Speaking of my season of rest, because this just came up in my Truths with Food group that I was just running before this, of how hard it is to like allow ourselves to rest, right? And feel like we don't have to earn it, right? But I am really learning how to do this without guilt. I pushed back my Truth coaching certification launch in part because I was feeling burnout and I felt like I'd have more excitement around it. And next year, I'm taking Fridays off. And most recently, I've started mixing up my workout routines. I was really noticing that I wasn't feeling like I had the energy I used to from my workouts, which often means you're overtraining. So I've even been like really incorporating like, how can exercise really be restorative? So I'm doing more bike riding. I just started bike riding. Oh my God, I'm obsessed. I'll have to tell you more later. But doing yoga and more walking. So I'm telling you, it feels really good to rest. It takes some time to get comfortable with that muscle, but I really encourage everyone to look into that. I feel like this has been one of the hardest habits to change because I have gotten so much success from working hard. Long story short, I just hope everyone is taking some time to rest where they can on this holiday weekend, especially in America. So before we get to today's episode, which I'm really, really excited about, I want to tell you why. It's kind of like a behind the scenes of coaching. We got 2 listener questions. So I love via text. If you notice in the show notes, you can text me questions, comments right away. So the first question, we're going to answer 2 of the listener questions, came in from the last 4 digits of your phone number are 2726. Remember, if you text message a question in, I can't respond back to you with the answer. You have to tune into the episode, but I can't contact you. So your privacy is protected. So I just know this is the phone number 2726, and you are in Pine Mount, North Valley, Georgia. And the question was, are Liz's ideal age amino acids suitable for a woman over 60? Great question. Question came out of my conversation with Liz Wolfe a couple episodes back on metabolism as we age. So we reached out to Liz and she gave us an answer. So I'm going to let her answer the question.
Okay, this question comes from Pine Mountain Valley, Georgia. Phone number last 4 digits 2726. Are Liz's ideal age amino acids suitable for women over 60? Emphatically, absolutely, positively, yes. I designed these for women 35 plus, and 60 is 35 plus. But I think it's important to say that everyone can benefit from these. I just aim to support a demographic that I know well, which is 35 to 45 is my sweet spot. But really, the scientific literature on these is pretty clear. They are beneficial to my demographic because they support our now selves, the selves that want to perform well in the gym and recover well and supply our bodies with the raw materials that we need in times of stress, all of that. But they're also beneficial to our future selves, the future selves that want to maintain that muscle mass, be fit for any task, be healthy for the long haul. And they do that by supporting muscle protein synthesis, by supporting lean body mass, all of that. But in the 50, 60 plus demographic, they may actually be even more important. And the science really reflects this. There are studies that suggest they support muscle mass and potentially prevent muscle loss or sarcopenia that's associated with aging. Studies show that essential amino acid supplements like Daily Aminos Plus can increase muscle mass in healthy older adults. They are now being looked at as potential agents for increasing bone strength and osteoporosis. And it looks like they can even protect the brain. And I've said many times that, hey, if you're 35 and you're not into adding one more supplement, that's cool. But get your parents on this, get your grandparents on this. I truly think anyone over 35 should be on this just for basic health and muscle maintenance. If you're younger, this will be more of like a performance booster, icing on the cake type of thing. But for those of us 35 plus, all throughout the rest of our lives, I look at this as a baseline supplement, just like a multivitamin. It's that important. And again, mine has some additional ingredients, electrolytes and taurine, which can help your body actually use the electrolytes. And it's been studied to support the cardiovascular system, the metabolic system. It supports eye health. It's an antioxidant. It has anti-inflammatory properties. So yes, this is absolutely suitable for women over 60. And of course, I would be honored to have you and anyone else as a customer, but you don't have to choose mine. Either way, just utilize some form of essential amino acid supplement because it will absolutely serve you well. I hope that helps.
Okay, thank you, Liz. And I will just add that I have been using Liz's aminos, especially around the hacks that she talks about. So I don't have to eat as much protein before I work out in the morning. And also, I've noticed if you are going through perimenopause or menopause, you have to reevaluate your relationship with caffeine. So I've been using them sometimes in the afternoon when I need like a nice little pick me up. It gives me that without having to do caffeine, which means I can feel confident that I will have a better chance of sleeping really well that night. So that's also just a way to think about how to use them. Okay. The other question we got is from Philly, PA. And the last four digits of this number are 0592. And it said, "Hey, are you still doing a podcast with Dr. Deb McNamara?" And yes, I am. In fact, I'm interviewing her in 2 weeks. I wanted to wait to have Dr. McNamara on. For those of you who aren't familiar with her, she's an amazing, brilliant, pioneering child developmental psychologist. And she has a new book out called Nourished. And it's about how food is interrelated with attachment as kids. And so the book is really geared towards kind of struggles with food as kids and what are they really about. And I wanted to wait to have this Dr. McNamara on in the same time that I was launching Why Am I Eating This Now, which is my live group program that will be open in September. And the reason for that is I have a feeling everyone who listens to that episode is going to be blown away. You're going to make connections of, oh my God, this invisible thread of belonging and safety that we talk about here on Insatiable all the time. See it more clearly. I have such a better understanding. Dr. McNamara's book is brilliant. I recommend everyone get it. I've talked about it on all these podcasts that I'm on. And what we do in Why Am I Eating This Now is like, okay, with this understanding that Dr. McNamara is going to give us, what do we do now as adults, right? Now that we understand this is what happened in the past. So Why Am I Eating This Now is like, okay, what do I do with all these insights? What do I do with understanding perhaps why I've struggled with food? And the very first lesson of Why Am I Eating This Now is about connecting the dots and making these kind of connections that have been elusive for years, and really about why healthy eating is about creating more ease in your life, not more hard work and discipline. So I wanted to release that episode around the time that this program, Why Am I Eating This Now Live, where we chart this often invisible until once you see it, you can't unsee it. But the emotional significance of food, which is this invisible thread of belonging, that really tends to gather steam in our life, right? Dr. McNamara is going to talk about the childhood implications, and then what we talk about on Insatiable and my Truths with Food work and Why Am I Eating This Now is, all right, like, what do we do with all that? So that's why I'm waiting to release that then. But yes, her episode will be released in August. And we also have another amazing guests that I've been interviewing. So many good conversations to come. But let's talk about today's episode. So today's episode is like a behind the scenes look at how I coach specifically, right? Every coach has their own style. I would obviously never record my group coaching for public consumption. And I've lately been re-airing some episodes where I've been on other shows, including this one today. And I'm doing that because I get so much great feedback on how you love hearing the coaching and you're making your own connections and insights with that. So that's happened to be what happened on the what happened with Dr. Janine Krause on the Health Fix podcast. I came on, I wasn't really sure what we were going to be talking about, but I ended up coaching her through 2 stress eating times that she couldn't figure out why she was eating in ways that she didn't want to be eating. Specifically, whenever she'd go to visit her dad, she would overeat. And she had this fixation on nuts. You'll hear it in the recording. And why was she eating them before she went to her office, before she saw patients all day as a naturopathic physician, right? So I did a little spot coaching. And I know that it will help you as a listener. So we're re-airing it. And you're also going to get a real life sample of Why Am I Eating This Now program, what we work on in there, that program, what our triggers are, why we turn to food because of this sense of safety and belonging, and how do we work through that. And you'll see what I mean by there's no more rules, there's no more restrictions, there's no more giving you more to do, right? Who needs more to do? Who needs a 10-point self-care list? Not me. I'm all about resting. It's more about removing what's in your way, less stress, more ease, and more fun. So you'll want to keep up these habits. So listen for that. That's the main reason I'm re-airing that. So yeah, super excited. And again, why am I eating this now? The live group program is running in September. I'm so excited. I'm completely revamping it based on some of the new research that has come out about health behavior change and what I found through work through about the 100 or so clients who have gone through the program since 2018. So it's not a new program, but I reiterate, I keep my content fresh. This is not set and forget it. I'm always iterating to make it the best experience. And know that there will be an amazing community of women who will be there. It's just, oh my God. In fact, this Truths with Food group was like, I don't want this group to end. The best people are attracted to this work. I'm so lucky. And the community is great because we set the rules up for belonging. And belonging is really important when you're working through food stuff and why we turn to food. But belonging is when you can feel like you can show up as yourself and not be on, right? So you can be in community and not feel like you belong, but we create the ground rules for belonging, which is medicine and expedites your healing. It just, knowing you're not alone and hearing it day in and day out with other really wonderful women working through this is just, oh, my favorite thing. And then also there'll be some small group coaching. So you'll get smaller groups and you'll have your own coach to work through that. So if you're interested in that, get on the wait list at alishapiro.com/ Why Am I Eating This Now live group. And we'll also put it in the show notes. So you'll get information. You'll be the first to know about the free masterclass to promote it. And I always do a lot of teaching. I don't do like the bro marketing where I'm like kind of tell you nothing and then convince you need to buy it. You will get a lot out of it. And you'll also be the first to know about the dates and all the details, which we already have set. So one last thing before we get to this episode today, a lot to talk about. If you listen to the show regularly and you're on my email list, you probably know that I have this goal to get to 200 reviews on Apple Podcasts. And we started when I first asked with 175. And we are already up to 189 in like 3 or 4 weeks. I can't keep track of time anymore. I forget when I asked specifically. But I just want to thank all of you who have rallied. It really helps the show. It helps me. It's a really easy way, a free way to support the show. And so we only need 11 left to go before the summer ends, right? Which is in September. So if you haven't left a review, if you could, please do. And I'm going to read 2 of the recent reviews that came in. And again, thank you to everyone who has left reviews. I can't tell you how much it helps. Okay, so this one is from ejakes11, came here via the alcohol tipping point, stayed to heal. And it's 5 stars. It says, I originally found Allie via her guest appearance on another podcast. I love the interview so much, I jumped over to check out Allie's other content and will continue to listen to every new episode that comes out. I am 1 year into my sobriety journey, and I never equated the relationship with my addiction to alcohol and my addiction to food. Through Allie's podcast, I have learned how closely related they are. And not only am I continually reminded why I chose to get sober, I am beginning to heal my soul and my deep-rooted issues with food. It's a long journey, but each episode helps me a little more, and I finally feel like food and alcohol no longer control every thought that goes into my mind. And then we have one from Allie Boo 589. So helpful, 5 stars. I recently started listening to Allie, and I've learned so much. I'm so grateful for the wisdom, experience, and information she shares in this podcast. I don't even know where to start. I'll just say that I've been addicted to sugar my entire life, and this is the first time I feel like I'm learning information that is genuinely helpful and makes sense to me and can help me begin to address what I struggle with. I found the Sugar Rehab Season 10 very helpful, and I just re-listened and read the transcript for Season 10, Episode 7, and I am saving it to my phone to go back to. So much valuable information. Thank you, thank you, thank you, Allie. Thank you for that review. Okay, we've got 11 more to go before the end of the summer. All right, without further ado, here is a re-airing of my interview on the Health Fix podcast, where I do a lot of spot coaching with Dr. Krause to help her work through her "why am I eating this now" questions and experiences. Enjoy.
Welcome to the Health Fix podcast, where health junkies get their weekly fix of tips, tools, and techniques to have limitless energy, sharp minds, and fit physiques for life. Hey, health junkies. On this episode of the Health Fix podcast, I'm talking with host of the Insatiable podcast, creator of Truce with Food, emotional eating expert, Allie Shapiro. Allie coaches me in this podcast on why I go into squirrel mode with nuts and how my need for security is driving me to eat. So interesting to dissect the layers of our drive to stuff ourselves with insatiable things. Good stuff here. So let's introduce you to Allie Shapiro. Hey, Allie, welcome to the Health Fix podcast.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm already having so much fun with you. You're great.
Oh my gosh. I have a feeling that we could talk for hours. Don't worry, guys. We're not going to go that long, but we're going to have some good stuff for you today, because one of the biggest things that drew me to Allie was her podcast, Insatiable. And I'm like, oh my gosh, as we get older, Allie, some things just become very interesting. Like our vices, we hold on to these things. We're driven towards certain things. And I can't wait to talk about that. But before we go there, I love to have folks tell a little bit on their story. So you started out your health journey with cancer. Like, tell us what the heck happened? Like, how did that impact you and get you to where you are today? Give us a little scoop.
Yeah, well, I love that you're a naturopathic physician, because you'll probably agree with me on this. But I think it starts really when I was around 11, even before I was diagnosed with cancer, and I got my parents to take me to Weight Watchers. I grew up in Pittsburgh suburbs, strip mall, went in there, and I thought I had a willpower discipline problem, and I had maybe 5, 6 years before that, the timeline's kind of fuzzy for me now, had a pesticide exposure. And I was, my parents didn't spray our yard, but my friends' parents did. And we went and did gymnastics, and I sucked my fingers at the time. So I was probably like 5 or 6 years old. And they had Roundup basically spread. It was called Chemlon to make
Yep.
your lawn green. And I had this horrible rash for 2 weeks, and the doctors didn't know what it was. There was no like prescription or anything. And I just lived in an oatmeal bath. And as a naturopathic physician, for me, I couldn't detox that. And so I started to gain weight from that. But I thought, I'm just gaining weight. This must be a willpower discipline issue. And then when I was in 5th grade, I was bullied. And rather than telling my parents about it, I came home and ate bagels and carbs and all the stuff. So when I went into Weight Watchers at 11, I was like, this is a calorie issue. I'm eating too much. And in some ways I was, but it was a little bit more complicated than that, right? It was like what originally set off the weight gain was inflammation and the inability to detox, not a willpower discipline issue. So then I was diagnosed. So then, isn't it interesting? Several years, after being bullied and the stress of that, and then after pesticide exposure, 2 years later, I'm diagnosed with Hodgkin's disease at the age of 13. And what was complicated for me at the time was at that point, I grew up in the 80s and 90s, and this was 1992, and I had internalized that health equals thinness, right? That's the era that we grew up in, right? And so I ended up losing the most weight ever because in chemotherapy, you can't keep anything down. I mean, I had like a chipmunk face because I had steroids and that kind of stuff, but I was really thin. And so as I got out of treatment, lost the chipmunk face, but kept the weight off, then you start getting attention. The clothes, I could go to Contempo Casuals where all my friends shopped, right? And like put one of those big chunky belts on, right? And not have like a stomach. Or Esprit was like really popular back then, And for everyone listening, like you only went shopping once a year, at least in my family. It was like back to school time,
Back to school.
Back to school. That was the only time you bought clothes. And then in 11th grade, I got a boyfriend. Like all of this great stuff started to happen when I was thin. And so even though I was close to death, and that's what made me thin, I had just cemented this idea that thinness equals health, and it gets you all the fun stuff in life. And so in high school, I was able to pretty much outrun how I ate. My friends and I would always joke, diet starts tomorrow, and then we would eat like whatever we wanted at, wherever we were eating. But my mom and dad were both health conscious in the sense that my dad was a health and phys ed teacher. So he, was a runner and just fascinated by the body. And then my mom grew up on an organic farm. It wasn't called an organic farm, but like believed in natural medicine. So I had some influence that, yeah, we have some control over our health, but really it was all through this calories lens and an obsession with weight. And then basically fast forward, I go to college. That transition, that uncertainty made my overeating turn to emotional eating, binging. I couldn't outrun it anymore. And then I had my first job out of college, and I was always a great student, but was like really flailing in this job. And I was like, what? Like, I don't fail at work, or like school work type stuff. And so I was diagnosed with irritable bowel syndrome. And at that point, I had also was struggling with depression. I was struggling with acne. I had tried Accutane. I like cringe on it now in college. Tons of antibiotics. And so I just kind of was struggling, and I kept looking at, okay, I have to try antidepressants. I have to try everything Western medicine can give me. And food is still about calories, and you got to lose weight, and somehow all of this stuff is going to go away. Right now it seems insane to me, but that was my mindset.
Sure.
And yeah. And then at the age of, I think it was 26, I found the Institute for Integrative Nutrition. And this was about, 20 years ago. And Dr. Mark Hyman was teaching there. And at IIN, which is the abbreviation for that school, we learned all different dietary theories. And I really took to functional medicine because the systems lens, the holistic lens, it felt like it married the best of Eastern philosophy with like the Western science that I was familiar with. And I basically connected all the dots that all of these issues were related to my gut health and how the chemo destroyed my gut health. And, again, I just want to like contextualize for people. This was about 20 years ago. And the reason I bring that up is because people were not talking about gut health the way they were. And it felt like a really lonely place to be because most people at 26 years old are not trying to recover from their cancer treatments at the time. And then I would go to my doctors and they were like, this is not, like kind of dismissing me, right? Like what you eat doesn't matter. So it's just very lonely and isolating. But I was amazed at the results, and I was like, oh my God, people need to know about this. So I started seeing people on the side of my corporate job, and I was like, maybe this is just me. But it was really a time where like people were still pronouncing quinoa's quinoa. Like, do you remember that era?
Noah. Wait, people still do.
Yeah,
My family.
yeah,
My
yeah,
family does.
yeah. I mean, look, pronunciation is not in my genetic code, but so I totally understand. But it was before kale was on Modern Family. It was just a different era. And so I was working with people, and after about the fourth session, we would stop talking about food. And they were making these changes that had nothing to do with food. And I was like, what's happening here? Like, what's working? What happens when people get stuck, when information isn't enough? In parallel, I had made huge strides with my relationship with food because all of a sudden I had expanded my view of food. It wasn't just calories, it could be medicine too. But during stressful periods, I couldn't keep it up. So I always use the example of like in the cancer world, I was at risk for I'm still at risk for increased risk for breast cancer and thyroid cancer. So I would go for scans to make sure that the original cancer didn't cause other cancers. And so in the cancer world, we call it scanxiety season. And because our healthcare system is not designed around the user, from the time you know you're due to the time you schedule to the time you get the result, go in and get the test, meet with the doctor, could be 6 weeks, 2 months. And I would be binging on sugar. And I'm like, wait a second, I feel like shit. My anxiety's back. I now know cancer fuels tumor growth. What the fuck am I doing? Right. And so then there's like increased shame because I now have this awareness that I have control of how I feel. And so that led me to be like, wait a second, could I take a functional or holistic look at why I can't keep this up? Because the same way that my IBS, my depression, and my acne, which I was able to reverse, was just actually a symptom and not a diagnosis, could this falling off track also be a symptom and not the problem? Because I have a lot of fucking willpower. I have a lot of discipline. Like, I'm succeeding in life. Hashtag success. And I can't figure this out. And so that is what led me to grad school to study. Look, I thought I was the only one with this crazy relationship to food, but now, right? And again, now with social media, we know a lot more people do, but my clients and I aren't the only ones. And so that's what enabled me to create my body of work called Truths with Food, to realize that food is really about attachment and belonging, or a sense of safety, emotional safety. And so when we feel stressed, we often feel isolated from the very support we need. And that food, becomes this symbolic sense of I'm safe. So I just said a lot. Yes. Is anyone still listening? Is that the whole 25 minutes?
Oh my gosh. No, it's perfect because it's well said. You literally laid it out that we are using the food as, and rightly so, we need the fuel, right? But we're using it as our safety because, that's like one of the big things. I'm sure you probably find this too with your clients when they're stuck in fight or flight mode and they're like, I don't know what other things to do to give my body signals that I'm safe. I'm like, well, you're already doing it. You're choosing to not, to overeat or overindulge in wine or that's your mechanism. Now we figure out how to unwind it.
Yes. Yeah. Because I love that you said safe, because that's what I like kind of view food is. There's different levels of safety. There's the physical safety, like, right. Like, and yes, physical, are you in a safe environment? But from a nutritional standpoint, does your body have the nutrients and the inputs it needs to keep the lights on, keep your immunity up, keep your thyroid going, keep your reproductive function, if you're, premenopausal, going? Does it have all of that stuff? Blood sugar, gut health? Because without that, and I can divide it into physical, emotional, and soul, but really they're all connected, right? And they're all playing out in the same pattern anyway. So it's like, okay, once you get the physical down, to your point, it's like, okay, this anxiety now, maybe my anxiety has gone down because my blood sugar is balanced now, but I still feel anxious. And I think what's hard about attachment and I'll really say through the lens of emotional safety or belonging, is it's an invisible thread. It is this like, oh my God, especially in America where we're like, we're independent, we don't need people, and we think we should be self-sufficient. It's like, why should I think I need anyone, or why should I think I need anything? And just for listeners, the practical application of belonging is whenever you feel separate, different, or isolated, even if especially when you're around other people. And on the surface, it could be, oh, well, my food choices, because I have to be gluten free, or I want to eat healthy, but I'm not succeeding yet. So it looks like I'm trying and failing because I'm not at the weight I want, right? Those deeper emotional things. On the surface, it's about the food, but on a deeper level, it's about, I just feel really different here for some reason other than the food. Because whenever I talk to clients about, they're like, yeah, it's hard to order what I want or do what I want when I go out. And this is part of what we explore. It's like, okay. And they're like, it's about the food and there's other stuff going on there. And I'm like, yeah, that's what we need to look at. The other stuff is what we need to look at, that is making you feel like you can't bring your whole self to this experience, whether it's food related or not.
Mm. That's a deeper level than I think a lot of people have ever really looked into, right? Bringing yourself to the table, the belonging thing, you know, one of my friends said to me, or I think it's maybe even one of my relatives, that isn't it interesting how all of our social connection always is relates back to food. I wish we could do less things around food, but yet at the same time, because when you're working with stuff related to food, it kind of brings things up. You, like you said, you can't be part of the club. You can't, if so you think. Let's say.
Yeah, yeah, the perception is, and and it's like, this is why I love working with food. It's so rich because, I think of the original belonging and attachment is to like Mother Earth, right?
Mhm.
Like, I mean, if we're gonna go like really, big, it's like to the earth and the cycles. And so real whole foods gives us part of that attachment that is really healthy attachment and belonging, and like eating cyclically and eating. I mean, you look at gut health, it's like, oh, the research is showing the healthiest guts have lots of variety. Well, nature has built that in with cycles, right? Like, okay, you get variety if you eat cyclically, right? And it's like that orients us. And even I say with my clients, like, important family traditions, right? Eating that way, again, if you aren't celiac, or it's
Sure.
not those times that are wrecking your health. And those are really important rituals or traditions that help orient us and make us feel safe. Oh, I'm part of this heritage. I'm part of this. And it's like, that's really wonderful. We get that sense of belonging. But it's when that's the only sense of belonging. And I like that you use the word connection, because I think there's a difference between connection and belonging that is often intertwined. But connection can be like, oh, we're sharing food, we're connected over food. But belonging is like, I'm gonna say the thing I want to say. That, one of my clients, for example, she comes from a big like Catholic family, and she's like, I struggle with my sisters, like, and they're my sisters. Why is that? And so like we worked on it. It was like, oh, I stuff my face because I'm afraid I'm gonna say the thing that is different. She feels like the black sheep in the family, right? And it's like, oh, I feel like I'm going to say the thing that's going to separate me. But the thing is, she already feels separate from them, right? And so it's looking at, okay, like, what needs to be said? How does it need to be said? How do you need to feel like you're actually belonging in this situation rather than just connecting over food? Is that example clear?
Well, yes, and I've got some ideas in my head that I want to run by you to make sure I'm thinking of it correctly, because what you have me thinking about is like, okay, in my own personal life, there are certain folks that when I go to hang out with them, I feel like I need to eat more. Like I
Yes.
feel like I need to be like my dad, for example. And love the man
Mhm.
to death, but when I'm with him, I do feel like there's this drive to eat more. And so I'm needing to say something, perhaps.
Yeah, well, let me
Decipher
ask you
this.
this. What feels hard about being with your dad? And holding the and, you love him, and what feels hard about it?
The hardest thing with him is he has such a negative outlook on life. And so
Mhm.
for me, I'm like, stop brainwashing me with your, negative. I mean, he grew up in the depression, right? So rough stuff. And so I think for me, it's hard to hear all the negativity. And so I think that's what drives
Mm.
that kind of stuff in my work.
Mm.
Yeah.
And what do you think you have to do with the negativity?
I feel like I take it on, so I'm trying to block it. That's what I think. I think the food's trying to block it.
And what do you mean by take it on?
So I'm super sensitive to energy. And when
Hmm.
someone's like Debbie Downer, I feel like it's easy for me to grab it, kind of like empathetic. And so I think I'm
Hmm.
trying to block it. That's what I've thought about, but I don't
Do
know.
you, do you think there's this sense of responsibility to have to fix it?
Oh, for sure. For sure. I'd like to fix everything for him and make him see that the world is so much better than he sees it. For sure.
Yeah, yeah. So I think that is often in Truths with Food and my program, Why Am I Doing This Now? We look at our protection strategies when we feel at risk. And one of the big ones is the accommodator, who has really the fixer archetype of like, right? It's where we actually have a lot of confidence in like how we've handled our lives, right? So it's like, and especially women who we've been, conditioned to take on more responsibility than ours. Part of the discomfort then is like, oh, I have to fix this negativity. And it's like, and then that separates you because you're the savior and he's the one that needs saved, right?
Yes. Yes. Exactly. Exactly.
So what might be interesting is if you didn't have to fix it, how would you like to show up potentially different next time?
Probably just let him talk and not be affected by it. Not absorb it.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, this is the work. So that rather than eating, so you don't have to feel it, let him have it. And sometimes this comes out with clients like their kids will call them and they're like, and they're like trying to fix it, right? And I say to one of my clients talked about this with like her daughter. It's like, oh my God, she's always calling with the crisis. It's not the same thing as the negativity, but it's the same
Yeah.
relational assumption that I have to fix this. And I said, what if instead of trying to fix it, you asked her, what do you need? Because you want to be helpful, right? Rather than saying, like, I have to either fix her or just avoid her, right? Because that ultimately is not forging belonging, right? It's
Right.
it's it's not being in relationship with the person. So like maybe letting your dad talk and say, "Hey, is there anything you need from me around this?" And put it so they're that way you can help. It's wonderful to want to help people and support them, but often the best way to do that is to, and you know this in your practice, people have to come to conclusions themselves, right? We can't, and not a minute too soon can you try to convince someone something that they're not ready for, right? I mean, I see this in my own life. I have studied change so deeply because I'm so stubborn. Takes me a long ass time to figure this stuff out. But how does that sound as like a quote unquote plan? Not that for next time you see him, just to experiment with and see what you learn about him and what you learn about yourself.
Yeah, yeah, no, it sounds like fun, actually. I love experiments. I'm always in for that. I'm like, okay, okay, I can do that. I can do that. It's interesting hearing the overeating, the overindulging, the drive to want to eat more on a perspective of the thoughts, right? And so a lot of people might be thinking right now, and something I hear a lot, Allie, in my practice from my patients is that I just feel in the evenings when my family is home, I just need to eat. I just need to have my snack. I need to, I just can't seem to stop the crackers, the whatever. Let's talk a little bit about all the different things that could be going on that people maybe need to say and they're stuffing down the emotions just to give folks a little perspective because like for me I'm like okay, I could just be okay with not fixing him because I didn't really think about it was the fact that I was fixing, but drew that one out of me.
Yes, I love this question. So, food noise is a really popular topic right now.
Mhm.
I mean, I think that's how people are framing it. Bethany Frankel actually, I think, was the first person who called it food noise. I used to call it mental food gymnastics, but food noise is just in the ether now. And so I think, food noise comes physically when our blood sugar is imbalanced, right? It's like, oh, we don't have the right nutrients. okay, you need to start thinking about food. And it comes out in crazy ways if we're imbalanced. But there's also emotional food noise, right? Which is, we kind of delved into it, what it is with your father. And so in the evening, what happens to people is often it's the first time they have any space in their day, right? So they're pushing through, And in Why Am I Eating This Now and Truth with Food, we call it death by a thousand paper cuts. It's never often like one big thing, but it's a bunch of little triggers that all of a sudden, all those feelings come up. And again, when I talk about food being about attachment, from the moment we're born, right? Babies have two primal needs: touch and being fed. That signals, and you need a caretaker there. If you don't have a caretaker, right, you don't survive, right? So food is like a primal need, but you need the caretaker to belong to or be attached to is equally a primal need, because they're the ones who secure everything you need. So that's why why our mind goes to food when we're feeling unsafe, because this is coupled from the time we are born until, a long time, right?
Yep.
So I have identified 4 triggers that people can start to identify in the evening of what's going on. So the first thing, though, is when people are thinking they're with their families or they're by themselves, whatever it is in the evening, and they're like, I just want to eat. The first question I want you to ask is like, why does this make sense? Not what's my fucking problem?
Right.
Why is this in the house? Like that's not the issue, right? The issue is that you feel unsafe in some way. And that's natural. So first, just the question is, why does this make sense? Because we also can't change when we're in shame or guilt. So just like, let's regulate the system and be like, this actually makes a lot of sense. For some reason, I don't even know if I believe this yet, but I'm willing to be curious about it. And so the next thing that I ask clients to say is, and this is in my Why Am I Eating This Now live program, which is open for registration in September, is what is at the tail end of this emotional food noise? And so tail is TAIL. So the first one is, do I feel tired? Right? It may be the first time you're pushing through, you skip lunch, you think you don't need it, whatever it is, but am I tired? Right? The second one is, do I feel anxious? And anxious is really about uncertainty, right? And I think of uncertainty as coming from the outside. So we saw people's eating and drinking habits go really downhill during COVID. There was so much uncertainty, right? Even people can think of, right? Like when I look back on my own eating trajectory, the scans, the uncertainty, right? Was I going to be cancer free? Was I going to be okay? When I left for college, oh my God, I had this great group of friends. Even though I couldn't wait to get out of my town, I knew that town. And now I went to Penn State undergrad. I'm 40,000 people in this like place that isn't that different, but it's different enough, right? And so that's the A is anxiousness, which is really often about uncertainty. The I is, am I feeling inadequate? And this is when we feel not enough or too much. And this is really when the call is coming from inside the house. Like I feel like it's me, like I'm not enough instead of something is coming, through me. So for example, I used to think when I really wanted to date, it was like, oh my God, I'm not at the goal weight to meet the type of person that I would want to date, right? That's inadequacy. And then L is loneliness. And this comes back to, these are all about belonging on a deep level, but this one is really about it because loneliness, the official definition is our social needs aren't met. And so loneliness, you can be around other people, you can be around your family, you can be around your coworkers. And all of a sudden, but you still feel lonely. You feel that isolation, separateness. So an example of this is one of my clients I was working with. She was like, I just find myself standing in front of the fridge at night. And I feel like something, but I don't really feel like something. And I'm not hungry. And I just find myself staring there. And so I was like, all right, next time I want you to ask yourself, what's at the tail end of this? And you do have to get into your body for this. This is really like, our sense of safety is generated from our body. So I want you to think about it, but I want you to first drop in and feel like what's really going on here? What's really going on here? And what she realized is as she was staring in front of the fridge, she was thinking about all these like three big decisions she had made at work that day. And she was like, is that person gonna be mad? Is that person right? Like, did I say that correctly? Then the other one was like, oh, I didn't get back to that email. Fuck, I missed the debt. Like, so what was coming up was all this inadequacy. And the food was providing this like surrogate sense of, right, like, oh my God, attachment, belonging. I'm using those words interchangeable and they are different, but for our purposes, we don't need to know the difference. And it's like, oh, this is gonna make me feel like I belong, right? Like I'm enough in some way, that I'm safe emotionally. And so the path forward was not don't keep food in the house, do keep food in the house. Like that was not the issue.
Right.
It was, what do you need to feel safe and like attuned to your needs and like resourcing yourself instead of thinking that you're at the mercy of of and thinking about everyone else and trying to meet their needs basically. So ultimately it was like, oh, okay, next time that happens, I need to do some things with whatever's making me feel inadequate, identifying my needs there, and then moving forward. And that's how we cultivate an adult sense of belonging. Because again, the first 20 years of our lives, we do need to make everyone else happy. I mean, we can't, like, how long, Janine, was it till you could like take care of yourself? Like with like fully like shelter, food, water.
Last year? No.
Yeah.
At least well into my 20s. Like my parents, because of going to Bastyr, right, and for naturopath school, I was working to try to support myself, and my parents totally helped me in the beginning. I probably wasn't self-sufficient till after my mom died when I was 26. I really don't feel like I flew the coop till then. Really.
Yeah. And again, that's developmentally appropriate, right? That's what I wanted. I mean, I hear in the self-help wellness world, I'm like, don't care what anyone else thinks. And it's like, our survival was rooted in caring what other people think, right? Like this was the first 20, 25 years of our life, just developmentally, we are so attuned to what other people think and want and need because we do need to learn a moral code. We need to learn what's acceptable, what's not. Now, those are very narrow definitions of what is acceptable or what not. However, you have to come out of adulthood with some sort of compass. Or can you just imagine like just being like, okay, you're 26 years old, go make your way in the world without having any sense of right or wrong, good or bad. But the task of adulthood is to question if the values we have are those definitions really the most true and really what work for us. So for example, with me, I had to expand my definition of health to not just be about thinness and weight, right? It's like, oh, this food is about medicine because it's also about your gut health and your blood sugar and your vitality and how well are you sleeping and how well are you moving and are you getting sunlight? You know all of this. I mean, this is like what naturopaths have been saying, right? For like someone listen. But it's expanding even like our idea of responsibility, right? It's like, oh, I grew up because of my family, my culture, my gender, all of these things. And for most women, and I work with most women, it's like my definition of responsibility is I have to take it all on. I'm responsible for other people's feelings. I'm responsible for fixing. I'm responsible for swooping in and making it all okay. And it's like, what if, and this is what I teach like in my program, what if we redefine that as responsibility? So the ability to respond to what's present and that not being necessarily about us taking everything on as the example of your dad's negativity,
No, it's something that, I mean, we talk about it. I talk about it every day, right? In my practice, I talk about it in my own life. It's interesting because I feel like I'm, even with all the naturopath training, even all, I was once at a conference that basically said if food was the only thing in our way between us and our weight, we wouldn't have doctors, We wouldn't have naturopaths. We wouldn't have registered dietitians who are overweight and having eating issues. Like there is
Mm.
something deeper. There's obviously you figured it out. Um, you know, and I think as we get older, we start to really realize as the things mount for us, right? Now we've some people maybe having kids late, and then now we've got the perimenopause and the hormones kind of fluxing, and then we might be also taking care of our parents at the same time. So now we have all these responsibilities. It's no wonder that women gain weight in midlife, because where else are we going to put those emotions when we haven't been taught what to do or to even think through, like, why am I doing this? Like I mentioned to you before we hit record that we're trying to figure out if I'm a squirrel. Like we think that I might be a squirrel from a previous life because of my addiction to pecans, macadamia nuts, all these things. And here's the crazy part of it. And folks, you guys, I want you to understand I'm a human being and real, and I'm working on myself just as much as you guys are, and this podcast is working on myself too. I use it. I'm getting some coaching from Allie right now, guys. But really what I'm getting at here is like we develop these vices, and if we could slow down just enough, stop scrolling through the people dancing on TikTok telling you how to lose weight fast, but slow down and listen to folks like Allie and be like, oh wait, why am I drawn to these particular things?
Yes.
I think the nuts, the pistachios is repetitive motion to like mesmerize my brain. I don't know. What's your take on people who are addicted to pistachios?
Well, let me ask you, when are you eating so first of all, are you eating all the nuts? Like, is it the nuts and you're just rotating them, or is it like, tell me more.
Yeah. So I rotate them out because I will get sick of certain ones.
Hmm.
But it is a this is what I've learned. When do I do it? I do it later in the evening, or I do
Mm,
it midday when I haven't meal prepped and I need to grab like a snack and I'm in a rush. Didn't,
mm,
didn't plan the timing. And if I look at it deeper, I've connected it to the repetitive motion of pulling out of the bag or
uh-huh.
cracking the nuts. So I think I'm obviously self-soothing, but
Yeah.
let the experts speak here.
Well, and I love because what you're also, the repetitive motion, right, is creating a routine that's grounding you, which food grounds us as well, right? Again, and when we are overeating, especially, that phrase, I feel like the rug is taken out from under me. When we overeat, especially around uncertainty, it's to ground us. It's like, oh my God, I'm here. I'm safe. There's flat footing. So let me ask you this. What comes up if we use those tail triggers, what comes up, which one comes up for you when you haven't meal prep? Let's do it separately because they might be separate issues.
Yeah. Gosh, you know, two things, because one, there's a lot of, and because I talk about meal prep a lot and I do it most of the time, but when I don't, I'm like imposter. I'm an imposter. I'm not living
Mm.
according to my values and what I tell people to do because I fell off the rails this week, right? That's one. And the other one's anxiety because I will sometimes eat out of nowhere because I am trying to work through like how's this day gonna go. So if I eat if I become a squirrel in the morning early off, now I think I'm trying to soothe for the day, going like what's gonna happen today. Especially when I'm in Tacoma.
Mm. Okay, so what's going to happen for the day? That's uncertainty, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah, big time, big time.
Yeah, yeah. So, and I love what you're pointing here as the nuance that it's two triggers at once, right?
Right.
It's the inadequacy of imposter syndrome, and then it's the uncertainty of how's this day going to go,
Yes.
right? So, what I think is really interesting is okay, so those are the triggers, and then we have protection strategies
Mm-hmm.
against these triggers. And what these protection strategies ultimately do is put us in, we can call it perfectionist mindset, which is no risk,
Mm-hmm.
right? Perfectionism is really about there's no risk here. There's no risk of people judging me, of failing, of getting it wrong. I've done it so perfectly that there's no risk. And then there's like, okay, that's how you be good. And then there's, okay, here's what's bad, right? Which is imperfection, so much risk. So what I think, and you can tell me, how do you think, when you think, how is this day going to go? What feels hard? What are you worried about? How are you thinking about that when you think, like what is the I'm asking for the frame, but tell me your thoughts and then I'll help you see which one you're how you're
Sure.
protecting yourself.
Sure. So I have this funny thing. Back in the day, when I was seeing 2 to 3 people an hour, doing a lot of acupuncture, doing a lot of pain management stuff in my office, our system would glitch constantly where it would have 2 to 3 people showing up for the same appointment. And all of a sudden, I've got a really busy waiting room, and I'm like, oh my God, how many of those people? I don't want people to wait. That's not my philosophy. Oh my gosh, what do I do? And so I have almost this trauma associated with going to my office that links me to thinking like this day's going to go to crap because the computer's going to mess up the schedule. It's the weirdest trauma, but it happens. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And so is the thought process like, I'm gonna fall behind, or is it like catastrophizing it, or is it like people are gonna be so disappointed? And maybe it's all of it, but what is the how are you thinking about it?
Yeah.
The That's what I'm interested in, not necessarily the contents, but how you're relating to it.
Yeah, good question. I'm relating to it in terms of the catastrophizing. I'm just like it's all going to crap now. It's all going to crap now. Everything is gonna be awful. And then yes, there's also the people are not going to like me. They're not going
Yes, yes, yes. Okay. So what actually ends up happening, so in the Why Am I Eating This Now framework and truths with food, it's so you use the avoid protection strategy, okay? Which is there is a perfect, which is perfection. There's a place where I can control everything, everyone's happy, the day goes perfectly, and I'm at no risk for people not liking me. And then fuck, this the day is going to hell, right?
Yep. Yep.
And so that frame, which people think of as all or nothing, black and white, it's the binary mindset, is we're trying to protect ourselves, but it ultimately makes us feel even more stressed out, more uncertain, right? And so what I would ask you is, what do you think you need in those moments, in that moment when you're wondering how the day is going to go? Not to fix it perfectly, but for you to feel resourced to handle what might happen.
Oh my gosh. It's funny. Like I need someone to tell me that my computer system is not going to glitch. I need someone to assure me that that is not going to happen. So fun.
Yeah, yeah. Well, and if what you're talking about is connection there, right? Belonging, someone who knows how much this matters to you,
Mhm.
knows how important it is to you, knows how much that stresses you out. And so do you have like an office manager or
I have an assistant. Yep. Yep.
yeah. So it might just be really interesting. Again, everything I talk about with clients is experimenting because
Right.
as the further you go along in this journey of adult belonging, the more your needs can change sometimes, right? Like sometimes it could be something different. So it might be really interesting next time that happens for you to call your assistant and just say, how are the systems working? And maybe it's like, is it worth figuring out that because this is so important to you, a backup system or talking to her, what can we do if this were to ever happen? Right?
Right.
Because we can't control that. And she can't promise you that they're never not going to work. Right? That's like so unrealistic. But is there a conversation you guys can have so you feel supported in the reality that life is imperfect?
Yeah. Yeah. No, absolutely. Absolutely. Easy enough to have that conversation. Easy enough. Now, one thing you mentioned that I'm like, hmm, the avoidant thing for a lot of folks, that's a thing. But also just having that assurance. And I think for a lot of people, this is a big issue of assurance that everything's going to be okay, that things are going to be okay. And yeah, I'm like, okay, deep thoughts in the brain going right now.
Yeah. Well, and I would say that even in that scenario that we just talked about, is it's not about that everything's going to be okay. That's what we eventually realize as we tune more into our needs. It's that I'm going to be supported through it. So, for example, what I've
Mm.
figured out how to stop binging during my scans was what I realized was I had a deep story that my cancer was extremely burdensome or that I was a burden. And my cancer was a burden on my family. They were public school teachers. We had different people taking me to treatments. We lived in the burbs. We'd have to meet my mom halfway through. She had, I can still get emotional thinking about all the resources that it took of my family who was already stretched so thin. And so whenever these scans would come, I would try to just do it all myself. My parents would call me, "How you doing?" "I'm fine. I'm fine." And the judgment was like, I should fucking be over this by now, right? Like this is 10 years out and you're still stressed out about this. And it's like, of course, like this is actually the peak time of secondary cancers, right? But I just beat myself up, right? And my sister and my now husband, but my boyfriend at the time lived in Philadelphia with me. And it was like, what I realized I had to do was share, like, I'm scared. These are still hard for me. And what I realized is like, I thought I wanted guarantees that the scans were going to be absolutely clear. And what I discovered I actually needed was support through it. So it was like, I started asking them to come to the appointment with me. I started when my parents calling saying, I'm scared. This is hard. I had never shown a lot of emotion about my cancer experience because it was, I'm the first generation of cancer survivors. Things are very different. They just were so happy we were alive. There was no emotional support. So I had not worked through that trauma, right? And that was part of what my food issues, they were an invitation into working through that trauma. But what I realized was like, oh, I just need someone's support and to be here with me. That is what I need. And with that, I can work through it. I can survive it, right? Now, many times in my work with clients, I mean, we don't start off that deep. I mean, that took me like years of healing to even realize that was the issue. But we start off with like surface stresses and realizing like, oh, like I actually keep people out, right? And what I need to do is invite people in because it's not ultimately about the system never going down. It's can my assistant and I work as a team? And then can I explain to my client, the clients, I'm sorry this happened. Like we're doing our best. And am I allowed to be seen as a human being and not someone, and not, this does not reflect on my professionalism, right? So, yeah, I don't know. How does all that land?
Yeah, the idea of support, right? I think for a lot of folks, myself obviously included, I need the support, right? I need to feel supported. And I think for when I do talk to a lot of women, they don't feel the support. They feel like it's all on them. And I think that there's a lot of times it's their perception versus reality. Do you find that to be the case?
Yeah, well, and all of my work is on our perception, is altering because what people, and I mean, I can get kind of technical here, but in the emotional eating world, it's like wait 90 seconds and the emotion will pass. But that's emotions. But if the emotion, like uncertainty or inadequacy, I'm an imposter, if that is connected to a story, meaning in our past, those feelings were dangerous, right? Or unsafe, we could even say. Like tired, for example, doesn't seem like it would be unsafe, but so many of my clients feel like, well, I can't be productive. I'm going to fall behind. I'm not getting ahead, right? Like that feels dangerous because like me, their whole identity was built on how hard they could work, how productive, how much they can accomplish, right? So it's like, oh my God. So the work is on perception. So when clients say, I feel like this, right? That's more than an emotion. That's a perception of, right? Like, and you even said with your dad, like, oh, I wasn't conscious that I was thinking I needed to fix him, but the perception was that you did. So what's hard about this work is you're trying to see the water you're swimming in and being like, oh, how I feel. And it's nuanced because you do need to feel your feelings. But once you feel like you need to feel your emotions, but then you need to question the feelings of not that it's not valid, right? I'm in my Truth with Food group right now. Like people are feeling sadness, they're feeling anger, but I'm like, and all of that is important. And once we let that wash over us, can we look at how we're viewing the situation, not what we're seeing, not the contents of it, right? Like with you and your dad, it's like, oh no, you're still going to go visit your dad. Your dad's still going to be your dad. Jannine's still going to be Janine. And how are you viewing that relationship is what we looked at, right? Not the contents of it. Yeah. So it's, right, how we often relate to food is about calories. But what if we start looking at it as medicine? What if we start looking at it as an invitation into more wholeness, into calling back these parts of ourselves that weren't rewarded or, that we thought weren't allowed to come out, like the system going down, right?
Randomness, right?
And that stuff sticks with us. That it lives in the body, which generates our perception, because now we could get even more technical, but it people talk about mindset work, but no one's located the mind. It's actually an invisible projection of your body and brain together. So when you say, I feel this, right? I feel scarcity. Well, guess what? There's fucking really scarcity, and there's abundance. And where are we for real in this present moment? I don't know, right? And so we have to experiment to try to pierce through our perception of what's actually happening.
I love that you mentioned the term experiment. It's something that I use a lot in my own practice because I think a lot of people are looking for concrete answers and a quick fix, right? They
Yeah.
want to know like what's going to fix me now, doc? What's going to do this really fast? But when it comes to food hangups and many other things, let's be real, that experimenting and trying things out and being willing to do that is huge. Huge.
Yeah. Well, and I think when a lot of my clients self-identify as perfectionists, right? And so experiment at first is scary, but it eventually becomes liberating because it's like, oh, and one of the tools we use that I've created is called the zoom out tool. And one of the like frames of it is like, remember, this is a data point, not an end point. This is not make or break. There's no right or wrong. And it's like, that loosens that perfectionist, like, right? Because perfectionists, we build up, oh my God, if I do this perfectly, wild success, right? And if I do this wrong, horrible catastrophe, horrible failure. And the experimenting shows you that it's neither. It's always a mixed bag. It's like, okay, oh, I got some more answers here when I added protein. Okay, my hunger went down. Anxiety went down. Interesting. But I'm still craving some sweets. Okay, next step, right? And so once you learn that everything's an experiment, it's liberating of like, I'm going to try that. But you first have to have the self-trust and the perception that taking the experiment isn't going to really change anything all that much either way.
Right.
And
It's information.
Yeah. But now I'm getting like maybe too technical. I keep saying too technical, but too in the weeds is what I mean. Is when we are in that all or nothing, black or white mindset, we make everything about us. That's why it's really hard to not do that. But we can separate ourselves from that. And that's really that's also the work that is built into my work, is how do we not make everything about us so that we realize we're not inherently wrong, broken, need to be fixed. Rather, we're just figuring it out as we go. And it's safe to do that because, with the body, once you change a couple things, okay, let's recalibrate, right?
That's it. That's important. Not being all about you. Because I know so many people and this day and age that are like, maybe I need to go back to my macros and try and change that around, right? Like it goes back to the food math, basically.
Yeah.
And it's like, what if it's not food math?
That's a great avoid strategy to avoid doing the emotional work.
Right. It's exactly avoiding the emotional work. And like, yeah, I think the older I get, I'm seeing how, I can step back now and be like, oh boy, yep, that happened. And I think for a lot of folks, I hope that this does help to kind of open up their mind to really realize that there are a lot of hangups as to why we are doing these food things. Now, you have a quiz that probably unlocks a lot of this for folks, the what's my comfort eating style. Give folks a little scoop about the quiz, and then we'll get folks into learning more about your podcast and you and your program, Truth with Food. So tell us a little bit about the quiz, because I love to have folks look at those kind of things, because who doesn't love a quiz? Like,
I know. So we talked about your avoid, right? Oh, I'm avoiding and so what that quiz does is when we have these tail triggers, so when we're feeling tired, and we can also, maybe it's getting too long, but loop back to the imposter one, right?
Yeah.
But tired, anxious, inadequate, and loneliness, when we feel those, we feel at risk. And so we try to protect ourselves in some way, right? And so that quiz will help you figure out what is your dominant protection strategy. And that leads to really a self-fulfilling prophecy of you're going to continue to eat. And like in the case with your dad, you're going to continue probably to think, my dad's my dad, I'm me, right? And have this separation that is going to ultimately leave both of you in a fixed position that will prove that you're right. And yet there was all this possibility in between there. And I mentioned the accommodate, that is part of the strategy, right? Of thinking we have to be like the fixer, and accommodate everybody else and think it's either our needs or their needs, right? My client who with her sisters, if I say what I need, it's either that or people are gonna be mad at me and I'm gone. Instead of, wait a second, how can I bring this up? Because it could be a win-win situation if I approach this the right way. Of what I want to say, I think is dysfunctional about our gatherings, you know what I mean? But say it in a way that they can actually hear it. So you can take that quiz to see how you basically, it's protective resistance. It's how you protect yourself from giving yourself what you need in that moment. So that's what the quiz is about. Yeah.
Nice. Nice. Protecting yourself from giving yourself what you need. Dang.
Yeah. Because it feels risky. It feels
Yeah.
risky, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Many levels. And even exploring like what you need and being comfortable enough to say, because I think for a lot of women too, there's this feeling of I shouldn't want that.
Yeah.
Right? There's that guilt. Like I shouldn't want that. I shouldn't want to have XYZ, right? Or whatever it may be. I'm being selfish. That's probably another term.
Totally. Yeah. I mean, that was with my cancer. It's like, I should be over this. Anytime you hear the should, shouldn't, have to, must, Dr. Albert Ellis, who is I think he's big in cognitive behavioral therapy, which is plus or minus for me, but he called it masturbation, which I love. It's like, I have to. It's like, whoa. So yeah, but for sure.
Oh my goodness. That's a good, I like that term.
It's easy to remember, right?
Anytime we have some sexual reference, we're going to remember it. That or potty humor. I mean, if there's a fart or something attached to it, I am going to remember because
Oh my God, I love that. My son is 4. You talked about having kids. I had kid. I was actually told I was infertile because I was in early menopause, and I was in early menopause. But you can still get pregnant. And so my son, I'm 45. My son is 4.5, and he is in laughing at farts stage. So it's just, it's so funny. It makes me laugh so hard.
oh man, I love that age. I love that age. I apparently have some connection deeply to that.
It is such a fun age. It is such a fun age.
My goodness. Well, let's tell folks about your amazing podcast, Insatiable, and how they can work with you as well, especially with the Truce with Food program. And I also know, and I think I would, we have a lot of coaches that listen to this podcast, and you have a
Oh,
certification for coaches too. So please give us the scoop. Tell us all the things. So how folks can
yeah.
find you and everything.
So, yeah, if you love podcasts, go. I have the podcast Insatiable, 280 episodes. Started it in 2016. Should probably listen to some of those. I'm sure my thinking has changed. So, but we did just do a whole series on like menopause and perimenopause transition, because I thought I knew a lot and then found myself 30 pounds above my post-pregnancy weight 1 year postpartum, not 1 week, and was just kind of like, what? So it was everything I wish I knew before going through that. And then, yes, my Why Am I Eating This Now live program, which the group experience the group is so important when you have a safe container to explore this stuff. It's a non-judgment zone. But it's also like no judgment. You're not going to make progress. Like, oh, it's just is what it is. It's a constructive zone. And that's really, it's like a Truce with Food tapas. It gives you an entry into this work. Some people just need that and then they're good to go. Other people go on to Truce with Food. And I credit if people join Why Am I Eating This Now, I credit that towards Truce with Food. But Why Am I Eating This Now? It's a 12-week program to really tackle stress eating, right? These experiences that we just kind of coached a couple through. I coached you through a couple, but you experiment and then it's like this worked, this didn't. And so that provides 3 months of like really learning what your triggers are, and what job food is doing for you and how to phase out the retirement of food doing that job for you over time. And then Truce with Food builds on that. And it's, I do bring in gut health and blood sugar in that, and that opens every January. And then we look at the deeper stories that are tied to our stress. So we talked a little bit about, some stressors you had, some stressors I had, right? I couldn't ask for help a lot because I had this big, deeper story of being a burden. And so Truth with Food really helps us change those stories and self-author new stories. And then, yeah, thank you for asking about the certification. And then in April, I will have what's called the Truth Coaching Certification. And this is not for people, the Truth Coaching Certification is a framework for stubborn and sustainable change. So it's not for me to create a lot of new alleys. It's not that. It's for you to come in and learn a toolbox where you can of change, and you can insert the existing tools that you have, but also understand the whole structure of what people have to go to really change on an identity level. So for example, one of my clients is a naturopathic physician, and she's someone who is also sober. So after going through the Truth Coaching certification, she created a signature program called Swell that helps women who are a couple years into their sobriety journey really repair from what drinking has done, and also help them continue that emotional journey, because it's a process. Another one of my clients named Kinsey, she created her signature program called Restore. She has a ministry background and a clergy background and a therapy background. And she had gone through Truth with Food herself, found it so profound. And so went through the certification, and she works with clergy who are really struggling with burnout, because they are people who take care of the rest of us. And they're told you have to put yourself last, put yourself last. I mean, that's not implicit, but it's implicit, So she's really coaching them through, okay, what is the stubborn resistance to not taking care of yourself? So that's an example. That's a few examples. Another client, I'm thinking, Erin, she's a trainer. So she gets in people through the door. They want to exercise, and then, any trainer or nutritionist will tell you, like, consistency and sticking with something is the elusive black box in our industry. And so she takes people when they fall off the wagon with exercise, but she also has a food background, nervous system, and has created her, I think it's called Soul Hunger, is her signature program. So anyone who wants to create a signature program that gives people really life-changing, sustainable results, and clinicians and coaches and therapists go through the process themselves, because we can only take clients as far as we've gone ourselves. So if you're interested in Truth with Food, you can do the Truth Coaching certification and be able to use all the tools, plus go through the process yourself. And most of the goals that people bring to the Truth Coaching certification, they can be around food, but a lot of people bring business goals and why they feel stuck in putting themselves out there, charging more, whatever it is what they do. Is what they bring to the process. So, and that is trauma-informed, ICF, International Coaching Federation approved for CEUs, and also for clinical nutrition specialists, you can get continuing education credits for that as well. So it's certified through a lot of the holistic thinking type of people, organizations.
Very cool. Very cool. I think it's incredibly important, and I'm glad you shared that, because I know a lot of folks who listen to the podcast are coaches, and let's face it, you're right. We can only get clients as far as we've gone ourselves, and definitely this is why I've started to go very far into the space of exploring, my subconscious mind and all of those behaviors, because as much as, my training for naturopathic medicine was deep, it was not like we learned about counseling, but we did not learn about our subconscious mind to the level that I'm learning now. And so I want
It's
folks
where it controls 90% of everything. I mean, our stories that I was talking about, that's all and it's not subconscious, unconscious, whatever you want to call it, because it's so deep. It's just like, this is what has secured us success in life, and this is what hasn't. It's like that simple. So we have to look at those if we're going to change the behaviors that we are struggling with. It's a deep, we're talking about, we've mentioned midlife here and there, but it's a really deep spiritual and soul invitation, I think, especially at midlife, to say, okay, it's my time.
Well, and so many people do go through the midlife kind of crisis component, and this is your time to explore yourself, and now we have the information to do it, because nobody was talking about this 20 years ago when I got out of
3 years ago.
5 years ago. Right. You're so correct. You're so correct. It's so important. And so, yeah, folks listening, this is for you guys. Embrace it. Go check out Allie. go check out Insatiable. Go check out all the information. We will have it at drjcrossnd.com. You guys can see all the info on Truths with Food. You can see the info on Allie's certification program and all of the details there. Allie, gosh, thank you so much for coming on. Thank you for coaching me, some little spot coaching. Love it. Folks, I hope will gain from just me being me, letting you guys know what goes on in this little noggin here.
Well, I appreciate that. I mean, you are a deep thinker, so I appreciate that you're willing to go there. Anyone who goes to naturopathic physician school is definitely curious and willing to think outside the box. So I really appreciate the work you're doing in the world.
Thanks, Allie. Can't wait to put this podcast out. This is a good one. Thank you.
Yeah.
Hey, Health Junkies. Thank you so much for listening to another episode of the Health Fix podcast. To help support my mission to bring you tips, tricks, and tools to help you optimize your health, I'd be grateful if you'd like, subscribe, and write me a review for the podcast. And if you hear a product you're interested in on the podcast, you can now go over to my website to learn more. That's doctor spelled out JKRAUSEND.com. Just click on shop and you'll find all the information on my favorite products that I stand behind and use myself. All affiliate income earned with your purchases goes directly to help support the production of the podcast so I can keep bringing you quality health information. I appreciate your support and am honored to have you listening to my podcast as a fellow health junkie. Thanks again.
Hey, fellow health junkie, thanks for listening to the Health Fix podcast. If you enjoyed tuning in, please help support me to get the word out about the podcast. Subscribe, rate, and review, and just get that word out. Thanks again for listening.